Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the lore-accurate Warframe tier list. We're not talking about who's the best at big dick damage numbers. We're not talking about who's the best at 4-hour-long endurance runs. If you're here for any of that, just go play Wukong, you fucking grass muncher. We're here to talk about who, canonically speaking, are the best Warframes. That being said, let's begin. Ashe is without a doubt the most average Warframe there is, because he's the last and closest thing in Warframe there is to a true ninja in space. With the release of big fucking spaceships and Wonderwall, the Warframe, Ashe is a reminder of how simple in concept Warframe used to be. That being said, canonically speaking, Ashe is basically just Assassination Classroom, except he's not the one who dies at the end. That's not a bad thing necessarily, but compared to other Warframes that exist, Ashe just isn't that strong. Atlas. Once upon a time, there was a wacky space cult which said, "Suicide is badass!" And so they attempted to alter for themselves with a giant fucking asteroid. Instead of sending an army or anything, the Orokin said, LOL! And so they sent only Atlas, who broke apart the entire fucking asteroid with a punch. Now, I'm obviously not a scientist, but it doesn't take a genius to understand that space rocks are fucking huge, but not as huge as the amount of big dick energy required to break one. Banshee. I mean, she exists, I guess. Baruch. Baruch is unironically scary as fuck. He's advertised as a reluctant hero, and also as a pacifist Warframe, but that's all bullshit.
Hi class, what comes before 47?
AK.
If Warframe were a classroom, Baruch would be the quiet kid. Chroma. Despite being the first Warframe to have a quest that is part of the main story of Warframe, nothing about Chroma is ever explained. You just basically see him and move along, just like this transition. Ember. Although her prime kind of hinted the existence of operators when it came out, there isn't really much to Ember. Equinox. Despite being one of the most annoying Warframes to farm, there is no lore here either. Excalibur. Excalibur is just as average as Ashe, but the difference is that Excalibur is the literal poster boy of the game, so he's sort of supposed to be simple compared to every other Warframe there is. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but still, mediocrity is the enemy of greatness. Excalibur Umbra. Now this is the cool Excalibur. The Sacrifice is without a doubt tied with the Second Dream as the best quest in the game. Not to mention it gives some tragically good backstory for Umbra, which itself is a rare thing in Warframe. 10-0 out of 10 would play again. Frost. He has no lore because he's just looted from a boss fight. Gara. Considering that she has glass powers, and she managed to hold off a sentient until she was forced to blow herself up, is kind of impressive when you think about it. But at least she actually gets some level of backstory, unlike Revenant. Garuda. Similar to Frost, Garuda has no lore since she's just acquired as reward, with no explanation. Gauss.
I'm fast as fuck, boy!
That's it. That's literally what he is. Flash and every other superhero that can use the Speed Force is proof enough how ridiculous just being able to go fast is. The only thing that would stop Gauss is probably a banana peel or something, I don't know. Grendel. In terms of concept, Grendel is probably one of the most underrated Warframes ever made. Because whenever you think of a character that never stops eating, you probably start thinking about Kirby. However, those of you who are well versed in Kirby lore would know that the very reason why Kirby never gets tired of eating is because his stomach is actually a pocket dimension. Visually speaking, Grendel isn't very intimidating. That much is true. However, if you still disagree with the idea that Grendel, being a literal consumer of worlds, isn't a threat, I honestly recommend you find someone that plays Warhammer 40k and ask them to explain what the Tyranids are. I hope you enjoy that lecture. Harrow. His quest was not nearly as scary as was advertised, but Harrow is interesting because he was the first Warframe quest that was part of the main story that was also actually good. Rel is an interesting character within the Warframe universe, since he alone held off the man in the wall, while all other Tenno were asleep. Since he was rejected from it due to his autism, plus his comic was pleasantly enjoyable to read, honestly, Rel is part of the reason why Harrow is such a great Warframe. And truthfully, it's a shame he's not played very much outside of Eidolon hunts. At the end of the day, Harrow could kick your ass and hold Sunday sessions at the same time. Hildren. Thick thighs save lives. But unfortunately, there is no lore to save Hildren from being canonically irrelevant. Hydroid. Honestly, I think he would have been a better Warframe if he was designed as the Cthulhu Warframe instead of the Pirate Warframe. Especially since there are two Warframes which kind of borrow his identity. Not to mention that Hydroid only exists because, quote, remind them who their gods are, unquote. It's kind of a disgrace they made him a space pirate instead of going with the eldritch root of Cthulhu. Inaros. He was a god king, that much is true. But being the ruler of a desert doesn't mean anything unless it's an anime. Also, for whatever reason, his base design has dog nipples, which is something that I can't unsee. Ivara. She was able to kill something which was designed to kill Warframes, which is honestly some bullshit anime power shenanigans. Cora. Her cat got more of a story than Cora herself, and that being said, Cora's cat is canonically strong enough to just straight up resist death. Warframe would have turned out a lot different if they focused on making death-resistant cats instead of big-titty space ninjas. Lavos. Casually committing prisoner abuse on top of having snakes on his armor, which are sentient, which raises a lot of questions that I'm sure will get retconned in a few years anyway. But Lavos, at least, was nice enough to kill the local janitor, so there is that, I guess. Limbo. I still find it funny how Limbo has gone from one of the most hated Warframes ever made to one of the most overpowered and hated Warframes ever made. As it is right now, Limbo is canonically the only being that has control over the Rift. Not only that, but canonically speaking, the original Limbo mathed so hard he died. Think about that. Loki. No lore, but I imagine it would be something stupid like he tricked an entire city with his decoy made out of wet cardboard and LED lights. Mag. If it weren't for Yarali, I would make a joke about her lore being reworked so many times that nobody knows if it's good anymore. Just like Mag. Mesa. Just like Chroma, Mesa is given basically no explanation and is thrown at the player to fight with no actual story to back up the Warframe, which is honestly a shame. Mesa could have been given a fun little space cowboy story, but instead you just farm her parts from this asshole. Mirage. Despite being the first Warframe to be given her own quest, she's unfortunately never given any actual story apart from she died fighting sentience, and also the Lotus knew her, but doesn't care to give much backstory. Her prime is better though, but all you really have to know is that she tricked Ballas into thinking we live in a society. Necros. I've read enough solo leveling to know that necromancy can be absolutely fucking overpowered in the right hands, and the Prime trailer makes a good example of it, even if it isn't accurate to the game. Neza. The femboy army is canon. I'm not even joking, it's actually canon, and I find that to be absolutely brilliant. Nidus. Nidus is similar to Revenant, in that he has a really solid foundation for storytelling, because it's easy to make a story about something as mysterious or as dangerous as the Sentients or Infested. Unfortunately, however, Nidus does not get the story treatment he deserves. Nova. Antimatter is a material composed of so-called antiparticles. It is believed that every particle we know of has an antimatter companion that is virtually identical to itself, but with the opposite charge. For example, an electron has a negative charge, but its antiparticle, called a positron, has the same mass but a positive charge. When a particle and its antiparticle meet, they annihilate each other, disappearing in a burst of light. Physics predicts that matter and antimatter must be created in almost equal quantities, and that this would have been the case during the Big Bang. What's more, it is predicted that the laws of physics should be the same if a particle is interchanged with its antiparticle, a relationship known as CP symmetry. However, the universe we see doesn't seem to obey these rules. It is almost entirely made of matter. So where did all the antimatter go? It is one of the biggest mysteries in physics to date. In other words, antimatter makes no fucking sense, and it can explode and shit. Nyx. Visually speaking, she's just Excalibur with tits, but otherwise has no story. Oberon.
The trees can't be harmed if the Lorexes are. You touch my trees, I will break your knees.
Also, I have no fucking clue if Oberon is supposed to be a paladin or a druid. Octavia. Although her quest is very enjoyable, I will never get over the fact that a musician space ninja was made. Protea, aka literally the only reason why this asshole is still alive, because for whatever reason as a gadgeteer, she has the power to rewind time. Even though time powers are already a total headache because of the shenanigans it tends to cause. Limbo gets away with it since he's, well, a fucking interdimensional magician, whereas Protea is not. I'm not here to deny that Protea has power. I'm here to say that her being able to rewind time makes about as much sense as Squirrel Girl beating Thanos in a fight. Revenant. So his thing is that he showed up out of nowhere after Gara died, and he fights the Eidolon until one day he gets the totally not flawed idea to try making contact with the Eidolon. And that's it. Whatever DE comes up with for him, it had better be good. Rhino. He's fat, but not in an interesting way like Grendel. Sure, his prime has some interesting bits written into it, but nothing has ever really been done with that, which is almost a shame. Almost. Sarin. I understand that she has massive tits, but still. She's sexualized so frequently that I'm pretty sure people forgot she's a living, walking violation of the Geneva Convention. Every person that dreams of having sex with her would die within hours of plague. And that is something I find very funny. Sevagoth. Local space pirate is too edgy to die. More news at 11. Titania. Some people will defend Yarrowly existing in the game because Titania exists. And she's a fairy, so there's nothing wrong with being pretty. That's not the point. Although Titania is literally a biomechanical war machine that can control butterflies and turn into the size of a pixie, that's believable because her creator from the Silver Grove quest had her own compelling story and rebellion from the Orokin. Yarrowly doesn't have that, which is why I can look at Titania and say that she looks believable as a Warframe. Trinity. She can heal anything. Except for her fucking lack of a backstory, apparently. Valkyr. Local space cat is literally too angry to die. More news at 11. But first, is Valkyr the most lore-confusing Warframe of all time? Yes and no, unless it's yes but also no. Vauban. If you played Warframe years ago when Vauban had just come out, you would know that there were actual conspiracy theories that Vauban was just some guy in a suit, like Batman, instead of being a full-fledged Tenno, since, at the time, Vauban was the only Warframe in the game whose power was throwing grenade devices instead of being simple space magic. That being said, canonically speaking, Vauban was made to fight the Corpus, but considering that the Corpus are still running around, I don't think he did a very good job. Vault. Yet another Warframe with no lore whatsoever. What a shocker. Wisp. Just like other Warframes on this list, Wisp is not given any form of backstory whatsoever, and is instead just thrown at you as loot after completing a fight. Wukong literally only exists because of China, yet they couldn't be bothered to give him a story. What a fucking disappointment. Zaku. Just like other Warframes here, Zaku gets no story due to just being loot rewards. Yarrowly. Yarrowly? More like, you're really gonna build this Warframe? Yes! Yarrowly lost a fight against a Redditor, so it's pretty obvious that she's canonically the worst Warframe. Zephyr. She's literally made of air, so I will not waste any trying to talk about her. This concludes the lore-accurate Warframe tier list. Anyone who disagrees with any of this clearly has not read the 1994 manga and is also a bigger virgin than me. Thank you for watching,